is there a certain time frame that plays a factor when a house is dirty? In other words, does it have to be dirty for more than 30 days or something like that, if that's sort of what the issue is?
I mean, generally with the cleanliness part, what I see is they'll do a and it changed a little bit. I mean, obviously when with COVID the last few years, they may have places may have modified that, but they would come and do like an inspection. It almost reminds me of, you know, like your parents coming into your room or something to see if you've cleaned your room. Or it's a little bit odd to me, but a lot of times they'll have a checklist and check what parts of the checklist, I guess, what they're supposed to check, what parts are, you know, acceptable, what parts are not acceptable, and they'll make some notes or whatever at the bottom. A lot of times what I see is they'll make some notes if you essentially fail the inspection and say, you know, you've failed the housekeeping inspection and we're going to come back. And usually they'll come back, they'll give you a time frame and tell you, we're going to come back in say 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. There's not an exact time frame on it, but in my experience, a lot of times when somebody's going to court over it, I'll see multiple inspections that were like, okay, we're going to do another inspection at least, you know, maybe in 30 days. And they a lot of times give people several chances at it. The problem I see is that I've seen some people that said, you know, you need to wipe the walls or something like that, and that might fail an inspection. And I've always had trouble when I've had cases getting the landlord or the housing authority to kind of explain to me what makes a fair inspection. You know, how many checks on unacceptable or whatever. You know, could you have everything clean and then they say, well, we don't think your walls are clean enough, or something like that, or your stove is not clean enough, and one thing makes you fail it? I'm not really sure. It is definitely, I think, a frustrating part for people because of that. So you may have wonderful property managers who go through and are reasonable about it, and you might have some that just have a different thought on how it should be. I haven't really gone back to really check the regulations to see if there is a specific time to come back or whatnot. But generally, under state law, you're going to have at least 14 days to cure something like that. So usually, I just see like anywhere from a 15-day to usually closer to a 30-day reinspection to give you a chance to fix what they've said is not up to par.
Okay. One other question we have for one of our viewers, and that is, are there different criteria for, or considerations, I guess, for elderly or disabled tenants?
Well, not exactly. Sorry. When we're talking about the time frames and duration of all these things, the rules of court or the rules in the federal regulations, or time frames that you might find in state law, they're all going to be the same. There's not a separate set of rules. However, if you are disabled, you know, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation that could include changing some of those time frames. One example might be your rent's due on the 1st and late after the 5th, but for some reason the disability check comes on the 6th or the 7th every month. You might get a reasonable accommodation that extends that time for you, or it may be that you ask for an extended period of time due to a disability or something like that, in order to move or something along those lines. You could ask for that, but there's not really a different set of rules. There are some housing and subsidized housing that is set up for elderly specifically. I'm not sure if they have any different rules on paying rent or whatnot, but I do find that some complexes in some places will still give you additional time to pay rent, or they might make it, instead of late after the 5th, they might give you till the 10th or something like that. But I think the best thing to keep in mind with any of these time frames is for disabilities, you'd have to ask for a different time frame as a reasonable accommodation.
Okay. Yeah, it seems that certainly seems like there maybe not necessarily different rules overall, but certainly some sense of reasonableness or common sense when it comes to someone who's elderly or disabled as to their
Right.
ability to meet the
Right.
rules they have to meet. So that's good to know.